Hey everybody, a very warm welcome to the show. I'm Rebecca McLaughlin-Eastham, and this week we're on the hunt for sustainable food sources in the Middle East and North Africa. A little bit later in the show, we'll dive into aquaculture and visit a UAE fish farm growing salmon and sea bream in a bid to reduce the country's reliance upon imports. We'll also meet a Kuwaiti man with a huge appetite for locusts. He'll even teach you how to eat them at home. But first, given that salmon are most commonly found in incredibly cold waters, it may surprise you to learn that they are being grown here in the Emirates. To find out more, I went fishing for some answers. A stone's throw from the warm waters of the Arabian Gulf, fresh Atlantic salmon, Japanese yellowtail amberjack and Chilean sea bass are not only surviving, but thriving. These cold water species are arguably a very long way from home, and that's precisely the point, says the Fish Farm, the UAE's first organic aquaculture business in the region, which was set up in 2013 to grow a variety of foreign species and slash the country's reliance on imported produce. And this is in line with the UAE's efforts to support marine biodiversity and replenish depleted fish stocks by 30% by 2030. The company established a farm in Dibba near Oman, a hatchery in the Emirate of Al Quwain, and an inland farming operation in Dubai's port of Jebel Ali. Nigel Lewis gave me a tour of the tanks and let me feed some young salmon an organic lunch whilst explaining the facility's chemical-free containment system using recycled seawater. Given rising demand for fish and global population growth, says Nigel, this RAS technique, which stands for Recirculating Aquaculture Systems, is the future of aquafarming.
There's an 8 to 10% increased requirement for fish every year. So fish got to come from somewhere. So there's no fish left in the oceans. Certainly it won't increase. So it has to only come from aquaculture. In a RAS system, you don't have any losses, more efficient use of fish food, no diseases, no microplastics, and with 100% traceability and the controls that we have in a RAS, there's frankly no other way to do it.
To make the business model truly sustainable in the long term, Nigel says they aim to rely less on importing young fish to grow and instead produce more juveniles, which after 18 months are ready for packaging as adults.
Aquaculture in the UAE plays a major role and will play an increasingly major role in food security for the region. And 92% of all fish consumed here is imported. These fish are coming from all over the world. I mean, we have Atlantic salmon here, which comes from the west coast of Scotland. We have Chilean kingfish, which obviously comes from Chile. And we have sea bass, European sea bass, which comes from Europe and Greece in particular. We get them by air freight. We developed a tank with an oxygen cylinder inside it so that we could actually transfer this fish long distances. In case of Chile, 50 hours in transit, which is a long time to keep a fish alive.
In its essence, Fish Farm is a passion project stemming from 5 generations of one family and their love of the deep blue sea. And their fondness for fish has added up to a very big catch, with production capacity of around 3 million kilograms per year being supplied to leading supermarkets and high-end restaurants. To talk market forces, I caught up with the company's CEO. You're arguably operating in a competitive space, so my question is, how does your product compare price and quality-wise to other organic products on the market?
There isn't any organic fish cheaper than our price. Why? Because we are closer to the market. We have a lower cost. It's only 2 farms that sell salmon organic, 2 countries, which is Norway and Ireland. So the competition is a bit difficult. This is why we are on top of them in the market.
What challenges, if any, does the extremely high temperatures of the summer months here and the high salinity of Gulf waters present to your business?
We're in a closed system. We take only the seawater and we set it up over here. So we set up the salinity, we set up the temperature, we set up also the current speed. Even we set up high tide, low tide for the fish. But definitely to hold the temperature in the summer, this was a challenge with the electricity. This is why we are now changing to solar panels.
Just ahead of this interview, you were out on a boat fishing for barracuda. You had fish for breakfast. So my question is, how big a part does fish play in an Emirati diet?
We have the main two diets that our ancestors were living on is fish and dates. So this is something that is a must on the coastal people here in the UAE. Is either fish and date. You cannot have a day that passes without fish and a date.
Which will hopefully point to these fish and the farm having a sustainable future, resulting in a food security tale with a happy ending. We turn our attention now to locusts and how some farmers' most feared crop destroyer is one Kuwaiti foodie's dream. Salim Saeed hopped across to the Gulf state to meet some sustainability champions using ingredients and methods old and new.
Here's some food for thought. Have you considered adding insects or worms to your diet? Well, at least 2 billion people globally have, according to a United Nations report which identified edible insects as a possible solution to food security. They provide high-quality protein, vitamins, and amino acids for humans, says the UN, and they're good for the planet, using much less land and water to grow than traditional livestock. Insects are also more varied and plentiful, with about 2,000 edible varieties identified. Swarms of 200 billion locusts have plagued farmers in East African countries like Kenya and Somalia this year, along with waves of the crop devourers striking countries from Pakistan to Argentina, which has been very bad news for business. But for this Kuwaiti trader, a locust swarm means business will boom. 41-year-old Adel Al-Huraydi has been gathering and selling the insects for the past 22 years. For one bag of live locusts, Adel charges around $30. His customers come to Souq al-Faga in Kuwait City and buy locusts to eat.
It's something delicious. From the time of our ancestors, that since we were children, they would talk to us about it. During the time of the Bedouins, the time of hunger, when they found locusts, they would store them for months to a year.
High-quality locusts haven't been found in Kuwait since the 70s due to urbanization and also pesticides, notes Adel. He makes weekly trips to Saudi Arabia, traveling up to 700 kilometers to the central region of Al-Qasim to source shorthorn desert locusts. While the male locust is arguably the more aesthetically pleasing of the two genders, with its yellow or rose-hued body before it's cooked, but it's actually the bigger, meatier female which is eaten and fetches at a higher price. Female locusts, called mukun, are Habib Khan's favorite due to their sweet eggs. The 65-year-old has been eating locusts weekly since childhood. Although a few ingredients might escape him, Habib says the recipe for preparing locusts is quite simple. They're boiled fresh, and their jumpiness is a sign of good health. They're simmered for around half an hour before roasted to a crisp, which he says makes them irresistible to eat. Habib also has a favorite family recipe.
My mother-in-law came up with a new idea to prepare locusts. You roast the locusts, and after roasting them, you put them in a coffee grinder and make a paste. Like how there's a pistachio flavor. There's a locust flavor which is sweet.
Once minced, Habib sautés the ground locusts before adding dates, sesame paste, and spices to the sweet, nutty mix. This locust delight is more popular with younger Kuwaitis, whom he says aren't as keen to add the winged grasshoppers to their daily diet just yet.
The people are scared. The new generation doesn't like to eat locusts. They get scared to even touch them.
He hopes the locust-eating habit will come back into fashion, like the growing trend of eating other types of creepy crawlies around the world. Entomophagy, or the consumption of insects as food, remains a tradition in many cultures across Africa, Asia, Latin America, and more recently Europe, with mealworms being prepared in Toulouse to add a twist to traditional gastronomy. And in Italy, Ento Experiences, or experiences with insects, are showcasing the tasty nutrition these creatures can offer. Leading the movement in Kuwait is worm rancher Khalid Al-Younis, who has no desire to eat insects, but is a strong advocate of using them to develop the country's arid land into farmable pastures. Through his YouTube channel, he's encouraging younger generations to cultivate worms at home, Endearingly called Abu Dud, or the father of worms, by his nearly 10,000 followers on social media, he's warming up viewers to the idea of raising the tiny creatures.
At the beginning, 5 years ago, we faced a lot of people that were grossed out by the idea of worms, and many of them blocked us on social media. But at the end, after 5 years, after 4 years, after a while, their mind were changed, and they become a customer, and they would buy worms for their homes.
The critters can eat about half their body weight per day in organic food scraps, including coffee grounds and paper tissues. Khalid says this lessens the damage done to the planet, which is why he created his community of worms, now in the millions, about 6 years ago, which he says doubles in size every 70 days. And Khalid hopes his online followers and their kinship for the soft-bodied creatures will grow just as fast.
Well, that concludes our Sustainable Feast for this week. We hope you enjoyed the show, and do be sure to catch all of our programs online at euronews.com. Before I say goodbye, here are some alternative foodie posts that we liked on Instagram. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Chef Matthias from the Netherlands prepared UAE-farmed salmon marinated in yuzu to make this vibrant dish. Mohammed visited this fish farm in Egypt, which is said to be the largest in the region. And Issa posed with this grasshopper, which he found in the Kuwaiti desert.